Look, guys, like it gets so toxic sometimes. Like when natural disasters happen, grads just know that somewhere out there, a grad student is going, I should go in a lab today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast. So today's episode is going to be on a rather heavy topic, which is mental health. As a result, we are wearing silly animal ears to hopefully lighten the mood and bring a little bit of lightness to what will inevitably be a heavy topic. But I wanted to provide a trigger warning before we do talk about several topics that are sensitive, such as depression, anxiety, and death by suicide. So please proceed with discretion if you are sensitive to those topics. And without further ado, here's the podcast. To start, Anna, do you want to tell me a little bit about your mental health before starting grad school, or, what it was like growing up in your brain?
Mental health.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've always kind of had a rather healthy idea of what mental health should be. And I don't know where I got it from, honestly. I think that's very curious because traditionally in like immigrant first generation situations, your family usually comes from a country where maybe they're not as progressive about mental health. Mm-hmm. So they're not about it. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of my middle school friends, like we were all from Chinatown, first generation families. And, I think that my friends relied very heavily on me and one another to cope with their trauma. And that's what you do when you don't have professional help. You just go to your friends to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of been my experience, like just growing up with other people that I felt like needed mental health. Did I need mental health when I was a child?
I just want to make sure that you're speaking correctly. Excuse me. Everyone has a mental health, okay? It's whether you need mental health resources, my dude. Like, your mental has health regardless of it's healthy or unhealthy.
Well, maybe sometimes it's like, sometimes she doesn't have health. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really feel like it's that spicy for me, like in terms of going to get mental health.
Like, you're not getting mental health.
Okay. Can we clarify? Well, then fine, Nina. You tell me what mental health is. You know so much about mental health. You tell me what mental health is. You come at me with your story of mental health. You set the tone. Asking me to set the tone. How dare you?
Oh, good Lord. Okay. Really? You want me to go?
Well, I mean, I feel like really at this stage, there's a misunderstanding of just what mental health is.
The term mental health has been thrown around a lot in recent years. I think my first exposure to depression realistically was the Zoloft commercials where the little blob would bounce around,
I do know what you're talking about. Those commercials are probably my first exposure, or one of my first exposures too. Or, like they'll honestly, sometimes I would get confused with the allergy commercials. And I know this is going to sound so dumb, but because they're very similar in that often
oh my God, you're right.
with like a depression commercial, they start off with like a black and white or sepia toned like moment, and then like the person takes the medication, like the antidepressant, and then it just full color. And the allergy medications were like, you start off with like very fuzzy vision, and then as soon as you take the allergy medicine, it's like we're like full clarity.
Oh
but yeah.
Okay.
I know that anxiety has been like a big issue for you. When do you remember first experiencing anxiety and knowing about it?
I definitely experienced anxiety in high school.
And knew about it. Like you
knew about it.
And knew about it. Okay.
I know that my anxiety progressively got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse to the point that it got to in grad school. I remember being anxious in high school, but not super anxious. It's just continuously gotten worse. And I've found ways to cope with it for sure, but I've gotten better over the past couple of years, I think, with medication. So,
Which is like, I think we're laughing. I don't know, why are we laughing about the
because
medication?
one time I asked Anna if I was still a bitch, and she said, "No, I think you're properly medicated now."
Now
Yeah.
everyone's going to
Well,
come and cancel
actually,
me.
sorry.
But
You know what's really interesting, actually? This is going to be relevant to people who take birth control. I started taking birth control pretty young for acne. Specifically, I was prescribed by my dermatologist. And for anyone who's taken birth control before, I think it's one of those things that you get prescribed it really young when you're not really in tune with your body as much. Because a lot of people do get it in high school, or they go to Planned Parenthood and they get it, or whatever, at least I guess in the United States, perhaps. But I look, I love making new medicine. I love the idea of fixing problems with medicine. I try to make drugs in my lab, right? That's my whole thing. But I think that there's something to be said about the impact of hormonal birth control on people and how much we do not really consider the effects on people's mental health. Because that's something that I realized
that's true.
recently. Like I was on birth control for almost 13 years until I went off of it. And my mental health just immediately switched. Like it just was like a complete 180. The drastic change in my mood, the way that I interacted with the world as soon as I went off of hormonal birth control was unbelievable. And I was like, how many women in the workplace do people think are just a fucking raging bitch? Or they think that they're like, yeah, I don't, she's this way or she's that way, or, just the sexism that we already experience in workplaces, and how much worse it might be as a result of her being on hormonal birth control. And I know that not everybody has the same experience as I do. Everybody has very different experiences, but there are some people who are sensitive to hormonal birth control like I was.
A lot of times it can be a positive benefit. Like it could stabilize
for sure.
it
does for some people. They actually have to be on birth control to
it does
stabilize their hormones. Yeah.
And for some people, like with you, like, and depending on the type of birth control, like it's a loaded topic.
So, I mean, I feel like you've already answered this question about grad school, but like, like mental health got worse for you in grad school. I think it was worse for everyone. I don't know a single person, and this is anecdotally, so I could be like, if you're out there, I'm sorry if I'm lying, but I do not know a single person who can tell me that their mental health improved during grad school. Okay? I just can't.
Yeah. I don't know any.
I don't know them. I don't know her. I don't know them.
Couldn't be me.
Couldn't be me. So I just think, is grad school the problem? Yes. But also now that, like, knowing that, assume this, right? Going into grad school, know that you do have to be mentally prepared. Like, I don't think anybody's perfect coming out of college in terms of their mental preparedness, but because grad school wears on you, try to go in with as good of a mental as you can. That's all I can really say about it. Mental, not mental health, mental. Like, go in, keep your mental,
with a good brain.
Keep your mental, this is what we say. I don't know. Some of us say this. It's just like, do you have the mental to do this right now? Like, that's what I mean. Like, if you're going to do something really challenging.
Who is us?
My gamer friends.
Oh, got it. Okay, cool.
I don't know. Like, it's like, do we have the mental to do another game? Do we have, like, you might have the energy to, you might have the time to, but do you have the mental? Like,
got it.
Because at a certain point, like, you play video games and you start raging and then you get tilted and then you can't play good anymore. So you don't have the mental to continue.
And then you rage quit.
So you don't want to rage quit grad school because you, like, usually, like, we know people who've rage quit grad school. Like, we certainly know them. And it's always like, I think the saddest part about it is like you spend so much time. You've certainly sacrificed a lot, to go.
Yeah.
And so it's always it's a mental fight every day when you're in grad school. I don't know why, like I don't know if that can ever change necessarily, but I would say that's the reality. Would you?
Yeah. I think it's interesting because it's the only experience that we've had, right? So I don't know how
That's
to
true.
compare it to anything else. I do know
That's
that
fair.
nobody leaves grad school with
Sometimes I wonder,
better.
is it like grad school or is it because we're millennials?
Is it
Like,
because we're millennials? Is it grad school? Is it because we were in our 20s? Like, what was it? But
is it the
even,
hormones? Is it, I don't
was it
know.
the birth
I don't
control?
know.
No,
Was it the birth control?
I definitely think that grad school definitely contributes to it because I think of grad school like a carrot. It's like you have the carrot on your head, but there's a carrot being held in front of you, right? And you're just going
Mm-hmm.
towards it, and you're trying to run to the carrot, and getting to the carrot is so unclear, right? And it's stressful.
Unclear.
Mm-hmm.
Stressful.
Mm-hmm.
Stakes are high.
Stakes are high.
Stakes feel high. I mean, I don't know if they really are. I think
No.
when you're in it, it feels high.
Yeah.
It definitely feels high. I would say that if you're out of it, if you know someone else, if didn't go to grad school and somebody else was talking to us about grad school, like I'm sure some of our friends were just kind of like, well, like it's
Can't
high,
be
but
that hard.
it can't be that bad. So
Yeah.
I feel like when you're in the moment, it feels really high. The expectations aren't always clear. You're always dealing with failure in some way, shape, or form because part of doing research is failure. Failure is built into the process.
I think that's the biggest part of why it messes with people's mental health. I think that research is so difficult on your mind if you are tying your self-worth to the progress of your project.
It's over.
It's
a wrap.
You can't do it, and you have to figure out how
can't.
not to. It's really hard.
And in fact, it's imperative. I think everybody goes through this, and this is where work-life balance comes in because people will always talk about work-life balance. And when my first year in grad school, I think the first time I heard work-life balance was from like a professor who like brought up this term in an interview. And I remember going, what is work-life balance? Like what I like did not understand. I think at the time it was impossible for me to understand what work-life balance was because like I didn't understand what the work was because I hadn't started graduate school yet. And so like, in some ways I didn't really have a life. So, what am I balancing?
Oh my gosh. Well, and that's the thing too. One of the things that we touched on in the first episode is the fact that if you take time off and if you're not working, you are delaying your graduation, right? And so there's this push that you need to be working hard because you want to leave, and you need to be working hard, and you need to get the papers, you need to get the research done so you can, draw your conclusions and write it up and leave eventually. And there's this guy who was in another lab. I was chatting with him and we were talking about me leaving. I was like, yeah, I'm finishing up. This is like my last thing, whatever. And he was like, yeah, has anyone from our cohort graduated yet? And I started listing off some people that had already graduated, and it was about 4.5 years they had finished. And he worked so hard in grad school. I mean, he was never home because he lived with some of my friends, and I knew he was just always at work.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, oh, wow, they're already done? I guess I have to work harder. And it just made me so sad because he was
Your heart
already
just breaks.
Yeah. I was finishing up and I objectively had not been working as hard as he had been, I still,
well, that's the secret sauce. And this is the other thing that makes it mentally challenging is that really your progression, I don't necessarily think your progression and how quick you get to your degree is that dependent on how hard you work. And if we defined hard by hours put in, right? Like, or your dedication or your passion even. It has nothing to do with that. Research doesn't care that you care.
No,
you know, like
it sure doesn't.
Research doesn't care that you're taking time away from your family during the holidays to work in lab. You might think research does, but it doesn't. So herein lies work-life balance, because I think at a certain point, everybody tries, like when you first get into grad school, you're like, we're going to work as hard as we can to get results. We're going to just do research because we think time and effort put in equals output. And so we're willing to like sacrifice, weekends. We're willing to sacrifice time at home, time with loved ones in order to make it happen. And then by year 3, I would say by year 3 for a lot of us, maybe it's sooner, maybe it's later, but by year 3 for me, I was like, I don't see the correlation. Nothing I am doing is making this progress faster. And then you're in a bad situation because you have spent a couple of years at this point, or a significant period of time, alienating your needs, just alienating all of the needs that you have outside of grad school. And you don't know how to get back to a healthy place. That's at least the issue that I had. Was I in a very healthy place when I started grad school? No, but I definitely let things go. I let like physical exercise go. I let going home to see my parents go, going to China to see my family go. Everybody makes those sacrifices, and hobbies.
What hobbies?
Started like a yarn craft night, because one of our really good friends, she's really proficient with like knitting and crocheting, I think.
That's not why we did it.
Okay, never mind.
Do you know why we did it?
Why did we do it?
So this is what happened, bro. This is actually hilarious. Joe and I moved in together in 2018.
My memory is like so awful. Okay, yeah.
Well, Joe and I moved in together in 2018, and I had this book that I'd had since I was a kid, and it was called Teach Me to Crochet. And he was so pissed about how much stuff I had. He was like, I've never seen yarn in our home. I've never seen a crochet hook. Can I get rid of this? And I was like, watch me.
Yeah, you do not want to say that to Nina Howard, Perryman, Yasmin.
Whatever my name is now.
Whatever your name is. You don't want to say that to her.
Yeah.
Because she will, out of sheer spite.
I will. So yeah, I've been crocheting.
Double down.
So how many years?
Long story short, it's been
like 5 years we've been crocheting. And so we went to a yarn store all together, and then you started knitting, Liz started crocheting, I started crocheting, and then her lab started crocheting because she started crocheting, and then we looped in Erica because she was so good.
She's a knitter. She's a big knitter. Yeah, it was a fun activity. We try to be social, and bring things back in for sure. And I think that was helpful. That was very helpful. Planning in that time was necessary because it was all about work. Like, part of the reason why knitting was nice is because, like, if your research isn't going well, like, you need to like surround yourself with other things in your life that you do well enough that it brings you some kind of satisfaction, that will supplant whatever validation your research is going to give you. It's a really, grad school's
hard,
a tough time. It's a tough time.
And as you go further too, you just do not know how much longer it's going to take you to finish. And that very nebulous time between 3rd and 5th or 6th year is just so like, okay, well, what do I have to do? How am I going to finish this? What are all these new responsibilities I have now that I'm a senior graduate student?
Other things get in the way. Other things certainly get in the way. Like unexpected things happen. COVID happened.
Oh my gosh. In our 4th year.
So like, just as we are we're fighting through what Nina and I call the Wednesday of grad school, the hardest day to get through grad school. And then you feel like you're on the other side of the hump And then COVID happens and you're
All of a
like,
sudden.
Okay. So I
Great.
think that added definitely another layer of
Yeah. Well, and not
stress.
to mention, Anna broke her leg.
I did. I broke my ankle in the summer of my third year. Like between the third and fourth year, I broke my ankle, which meant I had to be out of the lab for like 2 to 3 months.
2 months, yeah.
Which in the summer too, when like that time is technically your higher productivity side because you're not like there are less undergrads. And so you have more room in your schedule to do certain things. Like it throws you off. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, so she literally broke her leg and then I came back 2 months later. COVID happens.
Yeah, I came back. I broke my leg in July. I want to say June or July. And I didn't get back into lab until like October. And then of 2019. And then literally in like January, February, March, we were hearing about COVID in 2020. And then March, I think we went full quarantine. So yeah. It was not a lot of time before it was like, okay, making back in the lab.
Yeah.
Trying to do it. And that ultimately resulted in just a longer amount of time in grad school for me, relative to you probably as well. Which like I had to make peace with. That was not an easy thing to deal with. So I can relate to the grad student that you spoke with. Like you see everybody else is like starting to leave. That's the hardest part of grad school for me, was when I was starting to see people find their way out. And when I was still in the dark about what I was, when I was going to be done, how I was going to finish, that was really difficult.
Yeah.
Mentally taxing for sure. Yeah. So now we've established that mental health is definitely worth in grad school.
Yeah. In fact, what's interesting is that if anybody in my whole entire life that has known me can ask, would say that I am a sleepy girl. Okay. And what I mean by that is that I used to have no trouble falling asleep ever. I would fall asleep. Like when I was a kid, my mom and dad say that I would literally sleep at 9 p.m. on the dot. Didn't matter what I was doing. Like I would just fall asleep. I always fell asleep first at sleepovers. Like I would go head to the pillow, fall asleep. In graduate school, my anxiety got so bad that I could not turn my brain off, and I had to put something else in my brain to fall asleep. And I still, to this day, I cannot fall asleep without headphones in, listening to, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be a book, a podcast, a video, a television show. I have to be watching something to sleep.
I do something similar. Like I always do the New York Times crossword before I sleep.
Oh, really?
Like,
Joe and I do that together too.
I always try it. If it's a hard week, I always tempt it. I try to finish the week. Like I try to be consistent about it. And like, I think that I have to, like, at peak anxiety for me, it was like a routine. It was a nightly ritual that I had to do that. And if I didn't do that, I would have the worst time falling asleep. And I had the worst sleep probably in my 5th and 6th years. I've never experienced that level of like difficulty with sleeping. So, and the fucked up part about all of this is that your progress in research is what's making you depressed and making you sad and stressing you out and giving you the anxiety, right? It's probably research related or grad school, your progress related. So it impacts your ability to sleep. And because you're not sleeping good, you're also not performing well the next day. And because you're not performing well the next day, you're inhibiting your progress, which is just, that cycle. I'm sure I'm not the only one who experienced that cycle, but that cycle is vicious. It's vicious cycle.
Well, and there was a period that my boss like made the joke. This is not really like a funny joke, but it's felt very true. I got to a point where I was in an abusive relationship with my project. Like, oh my God, just wanted it to work so bad. And he was like, Nina, you need to cut it loose. Like,
you need to let it go.
Like, you need to let it go. This is only going to stunt your progress. I still think about that project to this day. And I'm like, because I had a lot going on that quarter, remember?
Yeah. I
So
mean,
I was
yeah.
teaching, I was the instructor of record for a class. We were on CGSA. We were doing so many different, so many things going on that quarter. I'm like, if I had just spent a little bit more time focusing on my research, would I have been able to make that natural product? I don't know. Who can say?
Maybe. But I mean, again, that like goes back to the whole idea of like, okay, well, like if I put in more, I'll receive more. And like that, I think to this day, there is still this, that's the only thing, that's the carrot. Okay. That's the carrot that they give you when you go into grad school. Like your professors are going to be like, the harder you work, or they're going to make some implication. It's spoken or unspoken. The harder you work, you'll get this. You'll get a JAX paper. You'll get a high impact paper, or you'll finish this project. It's going to look really good on your resume. Or like if you put in this time, you know, you're going to get X, Y, and Z out of it. And that's what they do to give you the positive encouragement to go after what you need to go after. The problem is research is not guaranteed. There are no guarantees in what you're doing. So, you know, that model quickly breaks down and you need to start finding other things to motivate you, essentially, to continue.
It needs to become a job. It needs to become, I do this and
it really does.
The results are the results. I'm going to work for 9 hours or 10 hours or however many hours you decide. Some people would say 12, but whatever. And I'm going to get this, and this done today. And and Joe is so good at that. My husband, Joe, when during COVID, I was a workaholic at home because I was trying to come up with a new project.
Yeah.
I was making up for it, but I was also like, I was in a series of failures up until COVID. And then I had to come up with a new project so that I could have a first author paper to leave. Right. And so I was staying up all night, not all night. That's not true. I was staying up. What I'm trying to say is I would work all day. I would be at my computer at 8 a.m. and I would finish at like 10, 11, midnight. And I would and of course I was doing other things at the time. I would eat and go on bike rides and stuff. But Joe, on the other hand, I was so impressed. I still can't do this myself. But he can. He does not struggle with anxiety the way I do. Where he says to himself, he makes a list. He's like, this is what I'm going to do today. And this is all I'm going to do today. And as soon as I finish these things, I am going to go home. And it usually will be like, and this isn't because he's lazy. This is because he knows exactly how much work he needs to get done. And he's a postdoc at Stanford. He is like a genius. Right.
Yeah.
So
well, that's like the toxicity of work that we face in our generation, probably. Like, you know, people talk about that as well with millennialism, but like, yeah, like if you're so stuck on how many hours, like it doesn't always translate to be that way. Having a healthy, I don't know. I think it's because, at least in our field, I feel like organic synthesis is very, there's this culture. It's a very prevalent culture of you do need to work 12-hour days, 6 days a week. If that's, in fact, I think that was what my PI told me in undergrad. He said that's how often he worked in grad school. But here's the kicker. It still took him 6 years to graduate. And 6 years is probably the normal amount for some people, but for him, he was working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. So his expectation was to get out in 5 years. And the thing that was holding him back was that his first author project, the project that he needed to work in order to like graduate, kept not working optimally. So for him, it was like staying a little longer. And I mean, it's not that his career didn't pay off. Like it did, obviously. He went to Harvard for grad school. He did get a first author paper out of the experience after 6 years, and got a really good faculty position right after that. So because I feel like he feels like he was rewarded for that experience, you know, that maybe it did work, but I don't personally think so. I don't think that there is that direct correlation, but there's definitely there are professors in our industry and there are people in our industry that still believe that. And as a result, I don't know if because Joe works in a slightly different field. He works with a slightly different type of chemistry. Do you feel like that's as culturally relevant in his field and he's just capable of kind of like pushing that aside? Or is it
Well,
more toned down in inorganic chemistry?
no, I mean, the first couple of years of grad school, he was doing
Yeah,
like the 12
the
hour days, 6
most.
days a week. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, and like, I mean, he'll still work weekends and stuff like in his postdoc and stuff. Like he works very hard, but he also like, I cannot plan things the way that he can for some reason. So he will be home every day, 5:30 or 6, and feed the dogs and etc. Whereas like I stay until I'm done. And so sometimes I come home at 6:30, sometimes I come home at 7, sometimes I come home at 11:30. Like all of these things, because I just can't, you don't know what's going to happen, and
Yeah,
I don't know.
I feel like for me, I do what Joe does. I have a list of things that I
Yeah.
want to get done that day, and I do end up going home that day, but I feel guilty. Like I
Yes.
feel like I should stay in lab even though I finished all of the tasks that I set out for.
Yeah.
I that's the part that I don't know how to get over. And
Rewiring the guilt.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And especially because like I am still in a lab where like I feel like, people do put in those hours. So I
Yeah.
feel like I'm doing something wrong if I'm not, and as a postdoc, it's like, I feel even more pressure because, as a postdoc, I should be even more hardworking.
Yeah.
Like,
Or so they
than
say.
I
Yeah.
was in grad school, which is insane. I don't know if.
Well, we're more
Yeah.
efficient, right?
Yeah.
Like that's one thing.
I think we are definitely
So,
more efficient. And as a result,
theory.
in theory, I don't know. I think that Joe does have a magical power to do what he does. I don't know if maybe he does struggle with guilt, but I certainly feel guilty. Leaving work at like 5
Yeah.
makes me guilty.
Oh, I feel so guilty if I leave at 5. It's
Isn't that
just
crazy?
insane. I know.
And like, I don't, like, none of our friends deal with this. Like, by the way, none of the people who didn't go to grad school feel this way, or at least chemistry grad school. I feel like they're all like working 9 to 5 jobs and they're like, well, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
we're done after 5.
Some people, I think it depends. I think that the one of the things that sounds really cool about grad school that's not is that like, because we're salaried, we don't have to work set hours. We can just set our schedule, and that's both a blessing and a curse, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I agree. I mean, it depends, because there are people who went to medical school or are lawyers or like doing other things,
That's
right?
true.
Like,
that's true. Yeah, med school's crazy
Yeah.
as well. Like, but here's the thing, like, when you're a doctor, you work those long hours usually because somebody's life depends on it. And then like for us, it's like,
yeah,
what, our chemistry is gonna be
like,
slower.
oops. Well, and that's the thing. I was thinking, I think COVID rewired our brains for a lot of reasons. And one of the things that made me realize is that none of this is important enough to risk my life, for one. When we were really worried about COVID and, we had no idea what was going to happen.
And other things too, like when like the fires happened.
Oh my gosh.
Like other things, like look, guys, like it gets so toxic sometimes. Like when natural disasters happen, grads just know that somewhere out there, a grad student is going, I should go into lab today.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like I told Joe, I was like, do not bike outside. The AQI is like 300. And he was like, I have to go to lab. And I was like, I'm not going to be doing that. But
that was the expectation not the expectation, that was like what a lot of people ended up doing.
I say 300, but I think that's an exaggeration.
I don't think it is. I totally remember the AQI being 400 at one point.
Yeah.
And it was wild. Okay. And like going outside just for a little bit,
I got a headache immediately.
It would make somebody who doesn't have respiratory issues feel uncomfortable. So it's definitely not healthy. And then like recently when San Francisco got all of that rain, it was a similar situation where it might have not, you have to make the decision on whether or not it's safe to go into lab. And oftentimes when you're a graduate student or when you're young in your career, you're more likely to be like, okay, whatever, I'm going to go.
I gotta do it.
I have to do it.
I did not. I live an hour away basically by train from work. I live 30 minutes drive. It was crazy. There were trees falling on the Caltrain tracks. Like, I wasn't going to do it. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
it's not worth it to me.
so yeah, I would just say that that is the kind of work culture that we're in graduate school. And that is probably why a lot of us do develop worse mental health in grad school specifically while we're there. So let me ask you this. Do you feel like work-life balance is possible?
I think that things are changing. How do I say this? So there have been quite a few deaths resulting from graduate school experiences and other things. It's throughout chemistry departments all over, and this is very sad.
For instance, when we started at UC Davis, I heard that there had been 3 deaths in a short period of time before I joined the department. And one of the students that died, their like significant other came to give a seminar on the situation. And as I remember it, it was, death due to self-harm. So like, it definitely was on my mind since my first year that this was something that, was not circumstantial to just individuals like going through different things in their lives, but grad school specifically being a really sensitive time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And there have been a lot of different, it's sad to say that there's a lot of people who this has happened to, or have decided to make that choice. Grad school is a very interesting time. And we say like, we had a good time in grad school for the most part. Like it really was not an awful time. Parts were awful. I did, suffer from a lot more anxiety as a result of it. But I mean, I did leave feeling a little bit, you get disillusioned, I guess you could say, because people are working so hard and the outcomes are not the same. Right. And then
it's not an inherently fair system or standardized system.
Right. Exactly. And it's just, it's heavy, right? I don't know.
It is very heavy. And I think the lack of standardization is something that we didn't touch upon. But yeah, like, as graduate students, you're held to various expectations. We alluded to it in our first episode too, where it's like you have these set standards by the departments. You have the qualifying exam and whatnot, and those are written out. But then there are also these unspoken expectations of you. And also the fact that your degree and whether or not you get the degree is subjective, right? There's a level of subjection to what you do. In the qualifying exam, for instance, and we can do a whole podcast about this as well, whether you fail or pass the qualifying exam is subjected in some way to your committee's perception of how you did. So that in itself can vary depending on who is in your committee. They might have different expectations of you. In addition to that, the same process goes for the dissertation. Like the people in your committee ultimately decide whether or not you have enough information or enough research, enough work done to essentially get your degree. And your PI is one of them too. So he or she can also have a decision. All of that contributes to pretty inconsistent, I would say the experiences graduate students have in grad school can vary wildly. And, that could also mean that certain people have a way worse graduate experience than let's say you and I did. Right.
I know. Yeah, exactly. And also dealing with so much failure too, just
inherently.
It's hard. It's really hard. And so, I feel like this has been a very sad episode.
I know. I guess going into this, I didn't know if this was going to be uplifting or be more of a down situation. I don't know if it matters, but ultimately I think it's just having an honest conversation about it. I think talking about it in general is something that we need to do more. It's about visibility, and removing this. It's removing the stigma. That's what you and I have spoken a lot about. It's talking about it more openly, being more comfortable with it, being comfortable enough to be like, I saw my therapist the other day and it's the same vibe as I went to the dentist the other day.
Yeah. I told my entire lab this because it was so freaking funny. But I have an Apple Watch and they have this walkie-talkie mode, right? So I go to therapy because it helps my brain. And did I tell you this already?
I don't know.
So
I
funny.
don't remember.
No, I don't think I did. I think I didn't tell you. So I'm in therapy this week and I have my walkie-talkie on, and my mentee in my lab, we have our walkie-talkies that we use in lab sometimes, and we have not used it in so long, but we like keep it on, whatever. And he's a words of affirmation girly, okay? And so I'm sitting in therapy, I'm talking to him about who knows what. And then all of a sudden I hear like a tit on my watch.
No, okay.
And he goes, "You are an icon." My therapist was like, he's like an older man, like could have retired if he wanted to by now. And he literally, and he goes, my watch doesn't talk.
My watch doesn't talk to me the way your watch talks to you.
It was so funny. Oh my gosh.
Oh my
anyway,
God, that is the most, like, that is so funny. The comedic timing must have been insane.
It was so funny.
That's so funny.
Was like,
yeah.
Because I was like, I haven't heard that. Like, what is that?
Siri,
anyway, it was
what
so
happened
funny.
to you? So the other thing I wanted to talk about specifically with graduate school is that you have to realize that we've already established that graduate school is stressful. It probably will make whatever mental health, whatever you were at with your mental health prior to graduate school, it's probably going to go down. And you're also working with other graduate students primarily who are going through essentially the same levels of stress that you are, which creates essentially a pressure cooker of an experience. And something that I feel like I didn't appreciate and wasn't ready for is I never worked in an environment outside of grad school. I didn't necessarily have a job or held down a job for a year in an environment where I'm working with a large team and I'm seeing them day in and day out. So grad school was the first time I had to essentially understand that I'm both a student and a professional, except we're all very sad students at this point, which means some of us are not necessarily going to be good at being professionals. Okay. And it taught me a lot about, well, number one, I think it taught, like, I had to I don't think it's hard for me to empathize with people in general, but yeah, like, you know, I would be so confused sometimes because there would be senior graduate students who would come in with definitely a bad mood, probably because they're stressed out about something, and that influences the whole vibe of the room, right? Like, you can't escape that as a graduate student because you can't just leave. You have to work there. So regardless of what the energy is like or what the vibe is like, you have to find a way to work through that. And that in itself is, I don't know, I just think there's something there. I think that's a huge part of being in graduate school, is not only dealing with your own mental health, but also dealing with other people's mental health.
I do
and working around it.
Yeah, I do think that one of the things that what you're touching on is really important. I think that in a truly professional environment, which grad school is not, I guess, I don't know, because the only professional environment I've really been in is a small biotech company. And that's not really, you know, I have no experience in corporate or, you know, but from my understanding, there is a level of professionalism, and there's a level of professionalism that I brought to my biotech company. I was a 22-year-old and everyone else was 50 plus. So I did not really bring emotions to work. I mean, I was fun at work because I tried to be fun. But what my point is that there is an expected level of professionalism at other jobs, in the sense that you're not going to come to work and you're not going to be in a horribly bad mood and show that to your colleagues. You can't, you're not, you know, unless, I don't know, maybe you can. Who is to say? We'll have somebody fact check us. But in grad school, your students and the faculty have never really had a normal job either. They've only ever been in academia. So nobody knows how to be professional, almost.
No one.
Not a
No
one,
one.
right?
I've heard anecdotes of PIs like full-blown oversharing to their graduate students about stresses in their lives, which one can argue is maybe not the most professional thing, because imagine yourself in a job, like at a company, and your boss comes in during a meeting, like a one-on-one meeting with you, and starts offloading, because they're going through it. That's the environment in academia, where there are certainly some people who know and understand to be professional in the way that you would define professionalism. And then there's this other atmosphere of it's just kind of whatever, because anything kind of goes.
Anything goes in academia.
There are no rules.
Yeah.
And there are no rules. So you don't know how to deal with it. And so it's a mixture of things. I've been on both sides, obviously. I've been on sides where maybe I've been with somebody, either a colleague or a superior, that maybe is oversharing a little too much for maybe what would be emotionally appropriate for the workplace. And I've also been that person who full blown is crying at work.
Yes,
because here's the thing, guys. Okay, you might think, don't cry at work. The key to not crying at work is not crying at work. Okay, and here's how I feel about it. I have to be at work because of the toxic work. Because we've spent this entire podcast talking about how toxic the work culture is. So you think it's going to make me feel better to stay home when Nina can attest to this. I'd be crying at work and still trying to run my column.
Yeah, she would just be tears streaming down her face.
It was specifically TLCing my column fractions while full blown having a mental breakdown, because in my head, I thought that's honestly what I was supposed to do. I didn't think there was another way. I didn't think it was, because here's the thing, I would have not just taken a day off. I would have taken a long period off, and I couldn't. In my head, I was like, I can't afford to do that. I have to keep coming in. And this again, we cannot emphasize this enough. Anything that prevents you from going into lab drags on your PhD.
Exactly.
And the very last thing you want to do when you're in a dark, sad place is extend
longer
that time.
Yeah.
You don't want to do that. So
yeah.
I fully understand. I understand it was not the most professional decision, but you're caught in between a rock and a hard place at that point.
Yeah.
You really are.
Yeah.
So that's what I have to say about it.
Well, yeah. So I forced Anna to watch this movie. I love this movie. I did. I made you do it. And I love this movie. It's a scary movie, and it has spoiler alert. You're full blown talking about the Babadook
on the podcast. Okay, no, never mind.
The Babadook. Yeah. Yeah. Remember when I made you watch the Babadook? Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, and she sobbed and sobbed and sobbed.
so much sad. Sobbing. That was my sad girl era. Let me be.
I know. Dude, I know. It's true. But I forced Anna to watch the Babadook with me because I'd watched it and it really resonated with me with my mental health because, so this is the spoiler alert. The whole idea is that the Babadook is a metaphor for grief. And the idea is that if you push it away and you push it away, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it overwhelms you so much that you're forced to deal with it effectively. And so at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, she figures out that she can put the Babadook in the basement in a box and be very mindful of the time that she takes with it. So she waters it. Some days it's really big, some days it's really small. But she's being mindful of it. She's not pushing it away. And so it's easier to manage, right? And I feel like I've always kind of had this same Babadook mindset with work for the most part. I can smush everything. We're just going to put it in a box. We're just going to put it back in my brain. We're going to do all the work, and then we're going to go home and cry. And sometimes I didn't really get that. You're crying at work. Like, I've cried at work for sure too, but I usually would just go to the bathroom and cry, and then I would snap out of it because that's who I am as a person. And I still tend to do that if I cry at work, like if I need to cry at work. But one of my very good friends died last year, and I cried at work. I couldn't not. I mean, I cried every day for like a week and a half.
When you're going through something that is uncompartmentalizable for you, whatever that may be. And I think that was it.
Yeah.
For you.
And yeah, I couldn't, I mean, I didn't get anything done. I mean, it was just,
and you kept going to work. Did you keep going?
I took the Caltrain. I cried on the Caltrain. I got to work. I cried on the Caltrain home. I didn't cry all the time, but like,
you cried a lot.
I did cry.
Did you feel like that was at all like the way I cried at work?
No, but that's because because for context of when Anna cried at work. Okay, when Anna cried at work, we were two girlies in a room to ourselves. Mm-hmm. I think that she thought, I don't know if she would have cried like that with everybody. She probably would have, truth be told, based on her mental state.
Yeah, but you're right. You're right. I felt comfortable.
You were comfy with me.
Cry. That's true.
With me.
And this is where all of this breaks down. We were in a professional environment, but Nina and I were best friends. So it's like, if you're not going to be able to cry with your friend, like, who are you going to cry with?
Exactly.
Also, I will say this. It's really important for the audience to know that Nina, she talks. She was a large part of the reason why I was crying at work.
She's right. I was. We were in a little tizzy.
Well, we were in tizzy. It wasn't even the tizzy. Even if we weren't in the tizzy, she just had a way of like,
making her, forcing her to talk to me about her feelings, and then I would make her cry.
So what am I supposed to do in this situation? It wasn't like I was in a situation where she was just like, I'm going to just be quiet.
I can't do that.
And not bring it up. Like, that was not you. So a combination of things. We fought sometimes. I'm just saying, like, our relationship in our scenario was not the most professional scenario, and it's not the best reflection of what I would have done in a professional situation.
True. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, but yes, but you cried a lot after your friend died last summer at work. And did people were people freaked out, or did you?
Well,
hide it?
I could hide it pretty well. Okay, it was just like if someone came to talk to me, because I do answer a lot of questions because I'm a postdoc and I'm friendly and I like help. I love helping people, so I would have to be like whatever, but. My mentee definitely. And I did go get coffee with one of my coworkers to talk about it because I'm pretty close with most of my coworkers. So
that's nice.
I told everybody for the most part.
That's great.
So I was like, yeah, dude, my friend died. So that was hard to deal with.
Yeah. Basically, like, I guess the point of why I brought it up was that, like, the layers, it's because everybody's mental state is not the healthiest in grad school. It can create situations where you get into uncomfortable situations in grad school because of this lack of professional barrier, right? And also the toxic work culture. Because like maybe your friend, like maybe someone you work with would really prefer to work at home, but there's a grant deadline and their boss is counting on them to get a result at a certain point. Like there are situations like that will come up, and it's not ideal. It's not a perfect system, but I think you and I have learned over the years that, especially in grad school, like if you have a bad interaction with someone, you can sometimes just assume that they probably had a bad day or that they have good reasons for being in a bad mood. At least by the end of grad school, I can safely look at an interaction that was not very positive and go, you know what? They probably had it up to here. with whatever.
Yeah, like I can't imagine how they were feeling in that moment when I thought they were being mean to me.
Like, so I feel like it's taught me a little bit of that, to be kind of, to give people a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, because grad school is hard. It's hard for a lot of us. And it doesn't excuse, like, just because you're going through something doesn't mean you get to be an asshole forever. Like, that is not the point, right? It's not like a free license to just be a dick to everyone. But in certain moments, not everybody's best characters are coming out, and that's okay.
And then you apologize.
Yeah, you acknowledge it, you move on.
You say, I'm really sorry for being that
I didn't
way.
do a good job of handling that. And
controlling
and
my
really
feelings.
The biggest lesson here is that taking care of yourself mentally is not just about taking care of yourself mentally. It's about being the best version of yourself that you can be at work, for the people that you work with, and also your friends. The people that basically spend the most time with you, right? Because you most likely have them. So a lot of people I know who struggle with taking that step into getting mental health, sometimes the barrier for them is like, oh, I don't know if I really need it. Or like, I feel like I can handle it, right? And then I have to be that person, and I have to be that bad guy to be like, well, listen, like, I know you can handle it, but I can't.
But that's what I did to you. I was like, I cannot do this anymore.
And I think that was very right. Like, I mean, at a certain point, for context, everyone, like, I was going through such a bad time in lab. I was bringing it into work for a number of reasons. Even if Nina was like a part of the reason why I felt comfortable bringing it into work, like, it still got to a situation where it was impacting her ability to work, and she had to literally be like, we gotta stop. Like, something has to change.
Yeah.
You need to talk to someone else. Like, she drew those boundaries. She had to draw those boundaries. And I did realize, I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, I do need to change my behavior, or something does have to change. And so I think that that's a really important lesson if we're going to talk about lessons in mental health, is like, when you're thinking about it, and if the barrier is like, oh, I feel like I can handle this level of sadness. And I'm, for whatever reason, capable of just handling extreme levels of sadness, and then just letting. The only time I do feel like I need to do something is when it impacts other people around me. That's like the biggest motivator for me to actually get up and change, or try to get into a better mindset, whatever way it is you need to.
Yeah.
So, like, do it for the people around you, because listen, it's not cute. So, like, it's not cute. It's not cute. And like, if you don't care about your coworkers that often, just understand that it probably seeps into every interaction that you have with other people, and it's ultimately something that could potentially be draining. And this is all to say that, like, there are things you could do. There might be things that you can't do anymore. Like, certain levels of grief is just uncontainable. It's unfixable. Certain levels of trauma is just unfixable, and unhealable. In situations like that, I personally just removed myself from the situation.
Do you feel like you were able to develop any good habits to kind of soothe your mental health issues during grad school? Or like, what did you do to cope during grad school?
It's very interesting, because I feel, okay, number one, I think this is a dumb answer. I'm going to say it because somebody has to say it. You need to exercise. You do need to exercise. Like, physical and mental are correlated. It's a two-way street. The mental affects the physical affects the mental. This is science. Like, it's backed by science at this point, and we know this. So, like, it sucks, because I don't like this answer, because when I was depressed, the last thing I wanted to do was go and exercise. Like, and to this day, it still is the last thing I want to do. But it is honestly part of the cure. It is not the cure. I think of like treating your mental health as like a cocktail of various different things. Like, you have a better chance of improving upon it or seeing a result if you hit it with a cocktail or a variety of different things. One of those things should be physical exercise, some kind of physical involvement. I know I was doing yoga at the time to help. And literally, this is me like going to yoga, struggling, did not want to go to yoga, got to yoga, and yoga would be emotionally. The only thing that kept me going to yoga is knowing that at the end of yoga, when you're doing shavasana and you've done you've done your entire thing, you're laying there. I knew the moment that I needed in that moment was when I was lying there, everything would come out. Everything that I was holding in that day would come out. I'd be sobbing on my mat, sobbing on the bike ride home. Literally, Liz, our mutual friend, she caught me. She intercepted my bike ride home one day, and I did not know what to do because at that point, I was like, I'm not gonna let other people see that I'm crying. I've made this decision, so I hold it in all day. I go to yoga, I'm crying, and we live together. So she and I somehow intercepted on my way home from yoga and her way home from work. And she taps me on the shoulder. I freak out, and I'm like, oh no! I like full Miyazaki tears, right? And I had to just pretend. I was just pretending like nothing happened. And I was just like, oh hey girl,
Oh my gosh.
hey girl.
Oh my gosh, you are so silly.
I'm insane.
Yeah.
So no. But I literally that was the life. So yeah, physical exercise was part of it for me. Do you have another addition?
Well, yes, I think that for me, well, I was going to also say yoga, which is annoying of us to say, but
No,
I mean,
that's
I
what
kind
we
of stopped
chose.
doing it. That's what we chose, right?
Yeah.
Because, and like, I played softball too, which was fun. Having an extra thing that made you leave work was really fun.
Yeah.
So I loved playing softball in grad school. But I think the time I felt the best about myself in grad school was when we were doing 6 a.m. yoga before work.
That was really nice.
Remember?
That made you feel so good.
That was,
and I hated it.
yeah. Are you saying me or you?
I mean, made you as in the general you.
Us.
Like, yeah, that made me
you.
feel
Okay, yeah.
very good. Like, I hated, obviously,
Yes.
as you know, I hate mornings. I'm not a morning person.
Yeah.
And honestly, I will not be doing that again.
The other thing that I've always done is journal. So I don't always, when I say I've always done, what I do is when I get sad, I journal, or when I get anxious, I journal and I start writing things down.
I would say it's a consistent habit for you.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have a friend who like journals every single day, which was so jealous that she could do it.
That's even more consistent.
I
That's even more
know.
consistent.
But yeah.
But I feel like, how long have you been journaling? Like in terms of length of time that you
Oh, my whole
been
life.
journaling on and off.
My whole life.
Your entire life.
Yeah. Well, I was obsessed with the Princess Diaries growing up, and I just wanted to be Mia Thermopolis, and she journaled all the time.
I always wanted to be that girl.
Mhm.
I always wanted to be that girl, and I just could not. I don't know what it is. Writing about myself, it's a method, but it hasn't really shown itself to be, I think, the thing that I can really, get my feelings out with.
It's
So,
very valuable for me. I'm definitely, because
you benefit
I
a
benefit
lot.
a lot from journaling because there are things that I just will not say out loud and I will only say to a piece of paper. Like when our friend died last year, I just wrote for sobbing for 15 minutes. And I just wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. Yeah, I was really sad. Anytime I go back and read it, I'm like, oh.
But that's like the one thing that you did. Like, I feel like that, like, it sounds like it's the thing that you leaned on, like, almost immediately.
Oh, for sure.
Because you've had this pattern.
I journaled every single day. Yeah. Every single day after we found out that he died, I was journaling until I didn't have to anymore.
I mean, I think that now that you mention it, I feel like going to therapy for me was like my attempt at journaling. Because I don't think, I think it serves a very similar function. It's like getting organized. I think that when I was feeling anxiety, when I was feeling depressed, usually that coincides with a lot of life events happening, like complicated life events happening. You want to kind of take stock of how you're feeling about it And I think the only difference is like when you go to therapy, you're not cataloging it yourself. Your therapist, you're relying on your therapist essentially to keep track for
Yeah.
you. Um, and I think for me, I didn't need to be able to play those moments back, just the act of scheduling in
Hmm.
time to go through the files in my brain. Yeah, you
Hmm.
know, not rigorously, but just to go through
Hmm.
it was enough for
Yeah.
me.
I'm with you. The first thing that I thought of, like, I never really felt better about myself than I did when I was doing yoga in the morning or working out in the morning or whatever.
Hmm.
I'm a morning workout girly because even if your research doesn't work, you did something that day that was good.
That's true. That
That's
is true.
yeah, and that's also
You
why
made
I make
that.
my bed because at least I did something right.
Yeah, I don't know if that brings me the same level of joy. I do it for different reasons. That's why
Yeah.
I always did my afternoon yoga. Scheduling this activity intentionally is important, whatever activity it may be. And I scheduled my yoga. I remember when I was peak SAD era
Weren't you
Hannah.
doing
I
5:45 p.m.?
Yeah, 5:45. Oh
Mm-hmm.
my God. Oh my God. How do you remember this to the minute? That's crazy.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was doing 5:45
Yeah.
for like I think 5:45 because that was like you're leaving work now.
Mm-hmm.
You're leaving work now and you're not going back.
Mm-hmm.
5:45 was
Yeah.
like a reasonable time to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, my anxiety came from how much time I was spending in lab because it was related to how much progress I was making in my research.
Yeah.
So 5:45 to me worked well.
Yeah.
And actually, in addition to that, I do remember now that I was journaling a little bit, but not really journaling. I was bullet journaling.
Oh, yes.
But I am not a consistent bullet journaling girl. I did a stint with bullet journaling, which helped me through some of the really tough times in my life. It really was genuinely helpful. Part of bullet journaling that I really enjoyed was because I was so anxious about the hours worked, I cataloged the hours that I worked through bullet journaling,
Nice.
which was really, really helpful because it reminded me that like I was spending a lot of time at work, even though I felt like at the end of the day, a piece of shit for leaving work. I can look back at the journal and go, but hey, you worked this much this week. You should be able to leave and not feel guilty. It was like different ways to like manage that guilt.
That's actually what I do too. When I start to feel guilty, I'm like, okay, well, what have I done? What? And I do try. One of the things that in my perfect state of being, okay, if I were the optimized person that I want to be, I would be doing 6 a.m. yoga. I would make my to-do list before I go to work. I would check off everything that I do, and I would add all the things that I did at the end. I would go home. I would not scroll through TikTok for 2 hours. I would spend time with Joe and my dogs and feel good about everything that I did and not go to sleep feeling anxious. That is when I do that, I feel good. The problem, it's getting yourself to do it, right? You know it feels good.
Yeah.
You know it's the right thing. You know stretching feels good, so you should stretch, right?
In relation to doing the things that you need to do in order to feel better, depression is a huge barrier to that.
It's
And anxiety is too, but depression is truly anxiety can sometimes be motivating. You know what I'm saying? Like anxiety motivates you sometimes to do things you don't want to do. Depression doesn't motivate you.
Yeah.
There's no motivating. There's no. You're just like I don't want to do that.
I'm gonna lay here. This is a really nice place to be.
I also knew I was anxious if I would suddenly, in my normal day to day, I'd be sitting on a train or something, and I'd suddenly imagine very vividly that the train got hijacked. And like I would do like a play by play in my head of the train getting hijacked, what I would do in that situation. Like it was a very weird place to be. And I would just be zoning out on a train and I would be there. So one thing that I utilize is to stop these things is my therapist told me to visualize literally a stop sign. And like having that symbol in your, like, and it could be a stoplight, it could be anything. If you recognize that you're in that space and your brain's just spiraling, you can just evoke the image of the stop sign. Just see what that stop sign looks like in your head and think about it and concentrate on it. And then that does really honestly sometimes work for me. So I do want to throw that out there. Have you ever heard of that?
I have not, but I'm glad that you said that because one of my things with anxiety is the same. I knock on wood. Oh, so I am also very superstitious, so I knock on wood literally all the time whenever I say anything. But yeah, I like anytime I get home before Joe does, because he normally gets home before me. I imagine he's gotten into a car accident. Knock on wood. Knock on wood.
You are just like, so, yeah, I know. That's really funny.
It's really not funny. It's actually very debilitating.
It's horrible. It's horrible.
Well, because
it's
then,
really bad.
Well, because then what I have to do is tell myself that I will be okay. If that is what happened, I will be okay, and I will persevere, and it's going to be fine, and like everything works out, and that it's going to be fine. Like no matter what happens, everything's going to be fine. I have to tell myself that, and I had it was funny when you said the train hijacking thing, because for me, I take Caltrain every day, and so I literally
was in New York. Yeah. So I was on the subway
all the time, right? And so for me, I was just like, well, I walk, if there's a train if there's a train going by me, every time I'm like, what if it just flew off the tracks and hit me? What if it fucking took me out, bro? Like,
I don't know, but my brain will go really far. Like I'll like think if I don't stop it, I'm like in the ambulance. Like I went through all of that and I'm in the ambulance. I'm on my way to the hospital with some terrible injury. Like I have to derail. I have to stop my brain because it will just continue to go on and on and on with the scenario, you know? And I realized like I had the self-awareness to go, this is not normal. You shouldn't just be, and if you're listening and this is happening to you, I just want you to know that there's something happening in your life right now that makes your brain think that you're somehow going to be in a train hijacking, and you know their names. They look kind of like John Travolta. You don't know why. It's probably because you saw that movie with the train hijacking with John Travolta in it. But like so funny. I had like vivid images. So that's definitely a really big tip that's helped me.
I mostly just need to like talk myself off the ledge. Really. I've learned how to do that. And actually, Lucas was somebody who helped me out a lot. He didn't even think he was helping me when he did this. Cause like I remember we sat next to each other. He was also in our lab. And so he sat next to me, and I would be sitting there and I would be like, oh my God, I'm so anxious. I have so much to do. 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 And I had like this like decision paralysis. Like I could not, and it's just like, I could not initiate. And in retrospect, I think that's part of the like ADHD or whatever, but like I could not. And I'd be like, oh my God, 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 oh my God. And I couldn't do it. And he would look at me and he'd go, Nina, just do it. And I'd be like, you're right. You're right. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it. And I would get up and I would just start doing it. And he was like, good.
Nike's been doling out this advice.
Exactly. Just do it. But whenever I think about him, every time I go down a spiral, you have to figure out what works best for you.
And that's what therapy, like you can't learn anything about yourself if you don't try new things. You know, if you're not systematically attempting it, even if it's not going to work the first 2 times around, because like, you know, choosing a therapist, like the first therapist you meet might not work out. It might not be somebody, but here's the thing. It might teach you about something about yourself that you do need in a therapist. And you would have never really known that if you hadn't sought that therapist out.
The therapist that I had for the longest time, which was 2019 to 2021, I feel like we didn't vibe very well, but she helped me so much. Like I learned so much about myself, and I learned so much about how to deal with people and why people are the way they are. And it gave me so much empathy for people. I think because I got into such a dark place at the time, it made me empathize with you, at least with your situation. Right. And so then I felt guilty.
And as far as I know, I was the main topic of conversation in your therapy session.
No,
at the time. I'm just kidding.
You were actually, you were the only reason I cried at therapy. And it was one time.
You're just so obsessed with me.
Whatever. Don't be mean.
I actually know, but it's very similar. I mean, I went to a lot of therapy for me was talking about you as well.
Yeah.
But you know, that's
neither here nor there.
That's neither here nor there. And if we ever get to a podcast about repairing our friendship and how we did it, we can go there.
Yeah.
But I would say that I think that that's the whole motivator of therapy. I'm really glad that you got that experience out of it.
That therapy time was super, super valuable to me, to the point that our friend Leslie literally was like, Nina, I can tell that you've been doing a lot of therapy. And I was like, thank you. I feel like I do present myself, because I was like asking good questions to our other friend. I was like, so do you, like, why are you feeling that way? Can you pinpoint what exactly you are feeling and why you may be feeling that way? And like, we were kind of
Similarly,
right. And because that's what she was so good at. She was like, what are you feeling in your body right now? And I would be like,
I use the therapy that I get all the time in my conversations.
Yeah.
We do it to each other.
You do.
We do it
you
to each
did
other.
it to me, and I was like, this.
I'll be like, I did it so much too, because I was going.
I know.
I was like, my therapy was peak. It was peak. So every time I'd be like, well, like, because like Nina went through a period of high stress with her wedding.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I feel like your wedding was like a big source of that. And so anytime you would be spiraling about something, I'd just be like, well, why do we feel like that today?
What are you really feeling? What is the from?
Root issue?
Yeah, exactly. No, same.
Anyway,
no.
yeah.
And actually, I think
it's very helpful.
I think it annoys my dad, because he's like, when did you get so reasonable? And like,
John!
Like, I looked inward and I don't know, whatever.
Yeah,
so.
I feel like it made me a better listener.
Me too.
Which is something that I always need to work on, because I am talkative.
You are. You admitted it finally. Yeah,
as we know, it's been a struggle to admit that finally now I can finally admit to myself that I'm talkative, and as a result, I don't listen as good. And so it's always good to practice it every now and then.
The feedback that I've always received is that I am extremely talkative and extremely loud, but I am also a really good listener, which is because I like to remember things about people. So,
yeah, I would say you are a good listener in the sense that you're capable of receiving information and giving it back.
Yeah.
The way that it was given.
Yeah. But then it depends on how in my head I'm in. Like, there's a couple things that recently that I felt really bad for not remembering in my life. And it's like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, but it's fine.
Losing your edge, losing that edge.
But it's okay. There's just so many things in my head now, because I'm 31. Just keep accumulating things.
It's understandable. Yeah. It's not like you're Sherlock Holmes. It's fine.
Yeah.
I always said you have a near eidetic memory. I never said you had an eidetic memory. Like, it's very close though. It's very close.
Yeah.
So I guess like the mission statement of this podcast is go to therapy. I feel like that's the only possible
if you need it
mission statement.
And
you know what? I'm going to say you should go to therapy even if you don't.
Okay.
I'm going to say it now. You know why? Because it's very challenging to get a therapist.
It is, yeah.
And it's not like you call up. It's not like a situation where, like, if you're going through it, you can get a therapist immediately. It's like usually your situation's not like that. So don't wait until something bad happens. Get your name in, put something on the books. I truly believe in preventative mental health care. Yeah. I really do.
Well, and
I think that's important.
That's something that people disagree with, though. Like, I think that I kind of feel like my therapist right now is like, why are you still coming? But whatever.
True.
Yeah.
But I actually,
go ahead.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Certainly, I will say that here's the thing. There's a huge shortage, honestly, of mental health professionals right now to the people who need it. And so they are doing a triaging thing. I mean, it's very natural to be like, well, if you're not going through something specifically, you might not.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think you need therapy all the time.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that.
Well, yeah.
But I'm saying it's not a bad idea to go sometimes even when you don't. Anyway, that's all I'm saying. But yeah you're right. Like, go to therapy if you need it.
And one thing that I also want to say, just in context of, this of grad school and mental health and all of the above, just like what I think is really important is that nothing is worth your life.
This is true.
You can get into a very deep, very dark place in graduate school as a result of graduate school, and nothing is worth your life.
Remember that grad school is temporary. It doesn't feel that way, but it is a temporary part of your life. And nothing that happens in grad school is going to change the trajectory of your life forever. That is oftentimes how it feels. I know it's easy to say that, but I can say on the other side of things, grad school is not the end of the journey for anyone. And it's simply a transient part of life. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's just difficult to see.
You are worth it. And you need to remind yourself that as much as you need to convince yourself. If you need help, seek it.